I think the failure you're talking about is extremely clear and consequential with respect to the doctors. And I suspect that we can learn something about how civilization goes crazy. That your point about certainty, where are the doctors now, right? I don't think you could be a working cardiologist or pathologist or oncologist or coroner and not be aware of the huge harm that we inflicted on ourselves. I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about vaccine adverse events. I don't think you could be unaware. And so where is the chorus of these doctors who got it wrong initially and have now realized that and are standing up and saying, it's throughout my cardiology ward, you can't miss it, right? Where are those doctors? Well, there are a couple, but it's not a chorus of them. Why not?
And most among the, it's more than a handful, but relative to the core of doctors, it's a handful. It's a tiny fraction of doctors. Most of them don't have wards anymore, right? They've been relieved of duty.
Oh, that's not who I'm talking about. You're right. That's a tiny number. The dissidents who came out, who initially said, hey, wait a second, what I'm seeing, it doesn't add up. What the claims don't add up. I'm seeing stuff that's not being discussed. There's a system that catches these adverse events. We're not monitoring it. Those doctors stood up, and it was a handful, and they largely and are continuing to lose their positions, their editorships, etc.
Yep.
I'm talking about doctors who presumably did what they thought was right at the beginning, said what they thought was true at the beginning, now have incontrovertible evidence in front of them and are not standing up now. That's the thing. And there are a couple who have.
Right?
There are a couple. Some of them have gone halfway, which confuses me. Once you've seen what the system...
What's the halfway? What's a halfway position?
Oh, a halfway position is, yes, these adverse events are very serious, but there is no early treatment option. There are no repurposed drugs that are worth consideration.
So
right?
the vaccines are still the right choice, or
in some cases, you get a partial, for many people they don't make sense, but which I don't think is true anymore.
Well, and I mean most scientific articles about anything having to do with vaccine adverse events still have to start. I mean, you could just see the guillotine over these guys, over the researchers' heads. You were told by the editor of the journal that you were not going to be allowed to publish any results that in any way show adverse events unless you basically bracket your article with, but they're awesome. Still, it's the best way to avoid COVID.
Yep.
And I mean, I think actually BMJ, British Medical Journal, is a very interesting exception that's emerging. The editor of BMJ turns out to be, I think, the reason that we've seen so many interesting op-eds and some research being published there and only there among the major journals.
Right, and which tells you something. The arbitrariness of, you have some journal in which author after author is saying the same thing, and the point is, well, under a different editor, but that journal have a radically different perspective, even with the same pool of readership and researchers who use that journal.
Editors are powerful, not just, it's not just for literature, right? This is the scientific, there's a reason they call it the scientific literature, because there is someone who is effectively not just, it's not, I don't know if I want to go here, but the concept of midwife gets applied in a lot of places where it has no place.
Yeah.
And it's, how could you object to midwife? It's no, actually, sometimes what you're doing is helping create. And midwives don't help create the baby. They help ensure that a baby ends up in the world that was inside a mother's body and is safe in the world. But the midwife did not help create the baby. And so editors are doing more than midwifing.
Oh, yeah.
By a lot. And I think especially in the scientific realm, those who aren't in science have this very strange cartoonish version of how it is that we come to know what we come to know. And that's part of why you can get things like #FollowTheScience. People are like, oh, okay, I'll follow the science. I guess so. That was handed down by the science god.
Yeah.
And it's exactly that kind of cartoonish vision. So yes, if the editor of a journal changes, can the journal change its direction? Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. And and we've seen, what is the Atlantic today? Right? It's not a scientific journal under any circumstances, but the point
Yeah.
is that used to be an important publication in which things were hashed out, and now it's effectively a highly politicized rag that still has high production values, and so people still take it seriously. But what I wanted to get at with the doctors is, I think the most brilliant and diabolical move of the public health authorities involved getting the doctors to very publicly speak as one at the very beginning of the vaccine rollout. In other words, the way doctoring is supposed to work, information accumulates clinically, right? Doctors see patients. If they're any good, they cannot help but notice patterns. And by getting the doctors on the record effectively challenging any claim that there was a pattern of adverse events before that pattern would have come through their office, right? By getting the doctors to do that, somehow it made it very hard for those doctors to reverse course.
And part of the way that was done was by giving it to the doctors first. Was by giving it to the doctors and all the other healthcare professionals first. And this was, I had one doctor who did end up taking and being glad that he took the vaccine, but early on he was like, "What are they doing? Why? Like, we can't know. Why? Why would you put the entire healthcare workforce at risk with a new experimental treatment first?" And I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that one of the side effects, perhaps intentional, at least by some, was exactly this. Now that it's all of you who've taken it, and it's your job to make sure that everyone else takes it, you got some complaints or what? Because you're already dosed up.
Yeah, which is not true. And actually, there's
That's not true.
That you're already dosed up. This is I think that this is a intuitive and wrong perspective that has lots of people failing to realize where they are in this program. In other words, there is a dose-dependent relationship. We can see it to some extent already in the evidence, in the data. There's a dose-dependent relationship between these, especially the mRNA vaccines, and the hazard, and therefore
the more you have, the greater your risk.
Absolutely,
yeah.
And this works in.
But still, the difference between 0 and 1 is rather large.
Right.